Hello and welcome to Record Rap, the Adventist Record News Podcast. It's Wednesday, June 4. I'm Juliana Muniz.
And I'm Jankiewicz.
In this week's episode, big questions on the universe explored at Faith and Science Conference, and Church reaffirms child safety with national commitment. But first, Ashley, can you tell us what's making headlines this week?
A ministry in Cavite, Philippines, is pushing back on a world filled with social media and instant messaging with handmade cards. Paper Love Ministry is made up of a small group of Adventist volunteers who craft handmade greeting cards with messages of hope, encouragement, and comfort. Studies show that handwritten notes evoke more emotion than digital messages, and 70% of adults say that receiving a paper card is more meaningful than a digital alternative. Cards created by Paper Love Ministry are handed out to airline crew members, church members, patients, and strangers, whose reactions are often emotional. Many cards contain Bible verses, allowing volunteers to share the love of Jesus subtly and respectfully. A post on Paper Love's social media reminds us that to be heard, we don't have to be loud, we just have to be sincere. In other news, new research has discovered that a gluten-free diet may not always be the answer for gut symptoms. Exempting the 1% of the population who has celiac disease, many experience the same gut symptoms regardless of their gluten consumption. Previous research suggests that a sensitivity to a type of carbohydrate called fructan may be the problem, not gluten. However, many people turn immediately to a gluten-free diet, which excludes important cereals and grains and can lead to nutritional deficiencies. Researchers recommend working with a dietitian to discover what is causing gut problems. There are even psychological treatments which can improve symptoms, such as cognitive behavioral therapy, to help rewire pathways between the gut and the brain. Juliana, are you gluten-free?
Absolutely not. I'm not gluten-free.
Me neither.
I have several friends that thought they had gluten intolerance, but then they tried healthy organic sourdough bread, and it was completely different on their digestion. So I reckon the problem is not exactly gluten. Sometimes it can be pesticides in the flour or something else.
Yeah, a lot of people assume that they have a gluten intolerance when it quite possibly could be something else.
Sometimes it can be even the quality of the gluten source you're eating, because if it's just processed bread from the supermarket, which are filled with chemicals and preservatives.
And my dad can actually eat bread in Europe without any problems, but the bread in Australia gives him some problems.
Now back to the South Pacific. Teachers, pastors, and church members recently gathered in Brisbane to discuss cosmology and life in the rest of the universe. The 2025 Faith and Science Conference was the third and final event in a series of conferences organized by the South Pacific Division since 2019. One of the main themes of this year's conference was, is there any biblical or empirical evidence that life exists anywhere else in the universe? SPD Ministry and Strategy Director Dr. Sven Ostring, who helped organize the conference, explained the importance of exploring this topic.
The fact is that we are inquisitive, curious human beings. So while we enjoy living here on Earth, there's always the question, is there life out there? Is there anything beyond our planet? And so to explore it both from a biblical perspective as well as from a scientific perspective provides some different views to the same question. And ultimately, we're looking at engaging with people in the community.
Professor Emmanuel Millen, Avondale Seminary lecturer who presented on the topic at the conference, brings a spiritual preparedness point of view.
There will be more deceptions. The Bible predicts more and more deceptions towards the end before Jesus Christ returns. It is likely that there will be a deception of interplanetary visitors being impersonated by fallen angels impersonating interplanetary visitors. So we should be on guard against that, and we should keep our grounding on the Bible and not on what people are saying or what the media might be telling us. And even if there is some sort of manifestation that looks very real of interplanetary visits, contact, we should base everything on the Word of God.
Other presenters from Australia, the United States, and Spain addressed a range of questions, including the effectiveness of mathematics in describing nature and whether the Big Bang Theory can be integrated into a biblical worldview. In addition to presentations and workshops, the conference included a field trip to the Sir Thomas Brisbane Planetarium.
Using computer processing of their images, they were able to take us from Brisbane out through the solar system, past galaxies, and to the very edge of the universe, and then fly quickly back again, which was very good. It was just a beautiful way to not only think about what God has created, but to actually see it using the computer tools that we have. It was a really dazzling experience.
Attendees also had the opportunity to shape the SPD's strategy for future engagement with faith and science. Delegates proposed developing a strong Bible-based science curriculum for teachers and pastors, a network of faith and science presenters for professional development, and big camp events, as well as a broader social media approach for sharing information on faith and science. Recommendations were also made to organize faith and science conferences at Avondale University, Pacific Adventist University, and Fulton Adventist University College, addressing both general issues and specific topics such as sorcery and the origin of life. Now, if you're intrigued about the topic of the conference, here's how Professor Millen summarized the matter of life beyond Earth.
The basis for this topic was Job 38, verse 7, which says that there were morning stars that sang together and the sons of God shouted for joy at the creation of this earth. So there are some beings out there in the universe that observed the creation of the earth and rejoiced with God. Some people view these beings as angelic. There's another view that there is actually other planets that have life on them. There are verses that are used to support that. For example, we have in Hebrews, it talks about there being other worlds, and they could well be referring to planets with life on them.
The Seventh-day Adventist Church in Australia has reaffirmed its full commitment to the Australian National Principles for Child-Safe Organizations. This initiative recognizes the moral, ethical, and biblical mandate to protect children and ensure the church is a safe, thriving community for all.
The National Principles is really a declaration that as an organization, as a church, as a faith community, we are committed to providing a safe place for children and really for anyone to come and worship and fellowship where they are not put at risk of experiencing abuse.
That's EdSafe General Manager, Pastor Michael Worker. He explained this initiative is vital for the church as faith-based organizations are more vulnerable to offenders infiltrating these environments to abuse children.
The Australian Royal Commission into Institutional Responses to Child Sexual Abuse, when it handed down its report about 10 years ago, they received more than 16,000 submissions. They processed around 8,000 of them, and their report indicates that 59% of matters that they considered happened in faith-based organizations, faith-based entities. So unfortunately, the sad reality is, yes, it does happen in the church. And as disciples of Jesus, as committed followers of Jesus, we want to make sure that everyone is protected, that no one is exposed to an environment where abuse can take place.
The Adventist Church in Australia aims to foster child safety by promoting transparent governance, risk management, education, and the empowerment of children and families following the 10 national principles. Australian Union Conference President Pastor Terry Johnson explains why affirming this commitment was important, even though the church has been vigilant since 2000.
While it was put forward there and we agreed with it in principle, I don't believe that we'd actually ever made it a public statement from the union, and that was important to us. I believe that the churches that recognize the value of children and recognize what Jesus said, it would be better for you to be drowned than to hurt one of these little ones. That's from a spiritual point of view, a theological point of view, and a physical point of view. The churches that take that to heart are going to ensure that their places are places of safety and not vulnerability, and that they will increase the number. And the churches that don't make this a priority will probably struggle because the community is not always sure that they can be safe in a church environment because of all the negativity, sadly, that they hear in the newspapers and the news in general.
On May 28, as Pastor Johnson and the AUC Executive Committee signed the Statement of Commitment to the National Principles for Child-Safe Organizations, he formally made a few requests to all conference presidents, church leaders, executive committees, and church and school boards. Here's Pastor Worker summarizing those requests.
So what we would love to see is every church, every school, every campground, every ministry face of the church in their board or their executive committee to take an action to adopt the statements of commitment for themselves, because it's a declaration that we support the 10 national child safe principles, and to display it in their foyer or their reception so that it is very clear to anyone who comes into their premises that we stand against physical and sexual abuse. And beyond that, we want everyone to be aware and to follow good boundaries, to practice good awareness of what situations or what circumstances might give rise to abuse taking place.
And that wraps up this week's episode of Record Rep. Thank you for tuning in.
Don't forget to visit our website at record.adventistchurch.com and follow us on social media for more updates and stories. You can also receive news straight to your inbox by subscribing to our weekly e-newsletter.
We'll be back next week with more news from around the South Pacific Division. See you then.
This is an Adventist Media podcast.